My name's Ryan, I'm 27, and I moved to a small town in Oregon for a fresh start. The place is quiet, close to work, and the apartment itself, though a bit older, felt cozy. At first, I loved it. There's an old charm to the place, with creaky wooden floors and tall windows that let in just enough light. The first few days went smoothly, but then I started noticing strange things. I'd come home from work to find small changes. A chair slightly shifted, the throw blanket on the couch folded differently. It wasn't big stuff, just enough to make me pause and think, wasn't that on the other side? I chalked it up to being tired. Moving was stressful, so I brushed it off. I'd tell myself, you're just forgetful, man. But then it got creepier. One night, I was up late reading, and I heard faint voices. Not talking, more like whispering, somewhere behind the walls. I thought maybe it was the neighbors, but I'd never actually seen anyone else in the building. I'd been there for almost 2 weeks, and not a single person had come in or out of any of the other units. I mentioned it to the landlord, an older guy named Mr. Jensen. I asked him if anyone else lived on my floor. He looked at me, kind of uncomfortable, and then sighed. He said, "Well, there was someone before you, in the crawl space above. We had to evict him. He was living up there without us knowing for months, sneaking into apartments to steal food, and God knows what else." I felt this cold shiver crawl up my back. "So there's a crawl space above my unit?" He nodded. "But don't worry. After we found out, I made sure it was locked up tight. Nobody's getting in there anymore." He patted my shoulder, trying to reassure me. But I felt anything but reassured. For a couple of nights, things were fine. I checked the little hatch in the ceiling, and it would be locked tight. But then I came home one evening, and it was slightly ajar. Just a crack. I told myself it must be a mistake. Maybe the latch was loose. I climbed up, closed it, and made sure it was locked. That night, I woke up to a noise, a soft scraping sound, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. My heart was pounding. I lay there, not daring to breathe. Then I heard it. Soft, slow footsteps, right above me. The next morning, my kitchen cupboard was open. A can of soup was missing. That's when I knew someone was there. I tried telling myself it was paranoia, that there was no way anyone could get in. But every night, I'd hear those faint sounds, those footsteps. And every day, I find something different, like they were mocking me, showing me they could slip in anytime they wanted. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag, left a note for the landlord, and drove straight to a friend's place. I never went back. Mr. Jensen called a few days later, saying he didn't find anyone in the crawl space. But I know someone was there, hiding in my apartment, watching, just waiting for the right moment. My name is Jake Thompson. I live in Lakewood, a quiet town where nothing much happens. I'm 34, a teacher, and honestly, until last year, my life was routine. But something happened that I can't shake, no matter how hard I try. This is that story. It all started with a deal I made with my brother Tom. We both live alone and travel a lot, so we agreed to house sit for each other when one of us was out of town. I'd recently watched his place for a week while he was out, making sure to lock up before I left. Nothing out of the ordinary, or so I thought. When Tom returned, he said he'd noticed odd things, small things I brushed off as paranoia. A coffee cup that looked like it had been moved. His jacket folded differently. "You're overthinking it," I told him. But the look on his face, he wasn't convinced. He swore he hadn't left things that way. I chalked it up to him being tired from his trip. A few weeks later, I went out of town, leaving my place under Tom's watch. Late one night, I got a text from him. "Hey, you home?" I replied, "No, remember, I'm still away." The next message sent a chill down my spine. "I just saw someone who looked like you in the window." At that point, I felt a knot in my stomach. I told him to leave, but he was adamant he'd check it out first. I didn't sleep that night, thinking maybe I'd get a call about a break-in or something worse. But the night passed with no updates, and the next morning, Tom was oddly quiet. When I called him, he sounded different, shaken. I don't think I was alone last night," he said quietly. He told me he'd heard footsteps, soft but unmistakable, following him down the hallway. He checked every room, but no one was there. When I finally got back to town, I met Tom at my place. We decided to check the security cameras I had installed a few months earlier. We pulled up the footage from the night before, fast-forwarding through hours of empty frames. But at around 1 a.m., something appeared. My blood ran cold as I watched. Something walked into the frame. He looked exactly like me. Every single detail. Same walk, same mannerisms. It wasn't just someone wearing my clothes or a mask. It was like watching myself, but I was hundreds of miles away. He moved through my house, adjusting things like he knew every inch of it. At one point, he stood in front of a mirror, staring, tilting his head slightly. He just stood there, watching his own reflection for a long time, almost as if he knew we'd be watching too. The figure looked directly at the camera, and then smiled. We scrubbed the footage again, trying to explain it away, but there was no mistake. I don't know who or what it was, but it knew me in a way that no one should. My name's Jessica, and I live in a small town in Oregon. I'm a pretty laid-back person, the kind who enjoys quiet evenings with Netflix and takeout. This story still gives me chills every time I think about it. I'd never experienced anything truly scary until one night, when something that should have been so innocent, a simple food delivery, turned into something out of my worst nightmares. It was a Friday night, and I was craving Chinese food, so I ordered from a new restaurant that just opened. The delivery took forever, almost an hour late. When the doorbell rang, I was already annoyed. I opened the door, and there he was, a guy about my age, maybe late 20s, scruffy but polite. He smiled a bit too warmly, saying, "Sorry for the wait, Jessica." I remember thinking it was odd that he knew my name so well, but I shrugged it off as small-town friendliness. Maybe he just remembered my name from the order. The food was decent, nothing special, and I went on with my night. The next evening, around the same time, my doorbell rang again. I wasn't expecting anyone, but there stood the same delivery driver with another bag of food. I didn't order anything that night, so I told him there must have been a mistake. He laughed and said, "Consider it on the house. We're just spreading the word." I took it, confused but thankful for free food. However, something felt off, so I called the restaurant to make sure. The manager told me they had no record of sending out a free meal, and they hadn't made any orders for my address that night. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself it was just a weird coincidence. The deliveries kept coming, almost every night now. Each time, the driver smiled just a little too much, lingering longer at the door. A few nights in, I found a small note inside one of the bags. It was handwritten and said, "Hope you enjoyed your show last night." My heart skipped a beat. I had been binge-watching a new series the night before. There was no way he could know that. I locked my doors, checked my windows, and told myself he was probably just guessing. Then, another note came. This one read, "Blue really suits you." That was the color of my pajamas from the night before. Panic started to creep in, but I still didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? What could I say? One night, I heard a noise coming from my living room, a soft shuffle. I was alone in the house. My heart pounded as I crept down the hall, feeling the floorboards beneath my bare feet. When I got to the living room, no one was there, but on the table sat another bag of food with a note that read, "I like watching you." I locked myself in my bedroom and called the police. When they arrived, they found no one in the house. But after searching the property, they found a stash of food bags and notes hidden in a crawl space in my attic, along with a sleeping bag and other personal items. The driver had been sneaking into my house between deliveries, watching me, keeping track of every little thing. I moved out the next week, and to this day, I'm terrified he might find me again.